So we're looking at solving a quadratic by factoring. We're given 18a squared minus 30 equals negative 33a, and we're asked to solve for a. Our first step is always put it in standard form. So if we add 33a to both sides, we end up getting 18a squared plus 33a minus 30 equals 0. So we have it in our standard form. Now we need to, we could go ahead and try to factor, but the entire quadratic. But if you'll notice, 18, 33, and negative 30, our first step would always be to factor out a greatest common factor. Up to this point, we haven't had a greatest common factor. Now we do. 18, 33, and 30 all share the common factor of 3. So this would end up being 3 times 6a squared plus 11a minus 10. And that's still equal to 0. And now we want to look at factoring the quadratic that's inside the parentheses. Again, this would be a matter of using the methods of factoring that we viewed in previous sections. If you need to review that, please go back and do so. Usually, it amounts to, if we don't have a leading coefficient of 1, it amounts to factoring by trial and error. Now, again, we can look at some of the nature of it. Using the factors of 6, we have 1 and 6, or 2 and 3. Looking at the factors of 10, we have 1 and 10, or 2 and 5. So we know it's going to be a combination of those. Using trial and error, if you go through the options, we find that the factors to 3a minus 2 times 2a plus 5. And now we can use the zero product property. I'm not going to bother with the 3 because we know 3 does not equal 0. So one of these other factors, one of these binomials, has to equal 0 in order for the product to equal 0. So we have 3a minus 2 equals 0, or 2a plus 5 equals 0. And now we solve for a in each of these. So add 2 to both sides, we get 3a equals 2. Divide both sides by 3, we get a equals 2/3. Or subtract 5 from both sides, we get 2a equals negative 5. Divide both sides by 2, we get a equals negative 5/2. And now we'll check our solutions by plugging them into the original equation we were given. So 18 times 2/3 squared minus 30. We want to know, does that equal negative 33 times 2/3? 2/3 squared is going to be 4/9. Again, we're still subtracting 30, and we want to know, does that equal negative 33 times 2/3? That's going to be negative 22. And again, you can multiply by the 2, then divide by 3, or you can divide by the 3 and then multiply by 2. Either way, you'll get negative 22. So let's simplify this a little bit on the left-hand side. 18 divided by 9 is 2. 9 divided by 9 is 1, and then 2 times 4 is 8. So this ends up being 8 minus 30. Does that equal negative 22? 8 minus 30 is negative 22, so our first solution checks because negative 22 equals negative 22. Now we'll look at negative 5/2. So 18 times negative 5/2 squared minus 30. We want to know, does that equal negative 33 times negative 5/2? So negative 5/2 squared is going to be 18 times 25/4 minus 30. And we want to know, does that equal 30 times 50 is 150. Or 30 times 5 is 150. 3 times 5 is 15. 150 plus 15 is 165. And it's positive because we have a negative times a negative. So this is 165 halves. And if you're not understanding how to do the mental math that I did, I just took the tens, 30, and multiplied it by 5, and then added the ones times 3 times 5. If you need to multiply it out in long form, do so. As long as you get the correct product, that's all that matters. Now we'll simplify this left-hand side. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then 9 times 25. I can break this up how I did up here. We have 9 times 20. That's 180. 9 times 5 is 45. And 180 plus 45 is 225 halves. And that's minus 30 is going to be 60 halves. And we want to know, does that equal 165 halves? And 225 minus 60, that is 165. So we have 165 halves equals 165 halves. So that checks as well and verifies that the solutions to 18a squared minus 30 equals negative 33a are a equals negative 2/3, or a equals 2/3, or a equals negative 5 halves.